The glass doors of Westbridge Enterprises loomed in front of me, shining under the morning sun like the entrance to an empire. And in a way, it was. My father, Jonathan Westbridge, had built this company from the ground up. His business empire was worth billions, his name synonymous with power and prestige. And yet, the moment I stepped inside, no one knew who I was. That was the plan. I had stripped away every trace of wealth, power, and privilege. Dressed in a simple button-up blouse and cheap slacks, with my hair tied back into an unremarkable ponytail, I looked like just another entry-level employee. The receptionist barely glanced at me before shoving a stack of papers my way. "Intern applications are on page 2, she said dismissively, her nails tapping against the desk impatiently. I exhaled slowly. Intern? I had applied for the management trainee program, a highly selective program for young professionals meant to be the future leaders of the company. Before I could respond, I heard a low chuckle from behind me. "Well, look at this," a tall man in an expensive navy blue suit said, stepping past me as if I were invisible. His Rolex gleamed under the office lights, and his smirk held the kind of arrogance that came from stepping on others to get ahead. "This program isn't for people like you," he said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. "Better stick to the intern pool, sweetheart." My fingers curled around the paperwork. This was exactly why I was here. These men, these executives, believed power belonged only to them. They thought they could dismiss people like me, people they assumed were nobodies. They had no idea who I was. But they were about to find out. The next morning, I reported to work as instructed, expecting some kind of onboarding process. Instead, I was shoved into a tiny, windowless office, barely bigger than a supply closet, with a tower of financial reports stacked on the desk. "Here's your first task," said Mr. Calloway, one of the senior executives. He dropped another thick folder onto my desk. "Summarize these reports. I need them on my desk by 7 a.m. tomorrow." I looked at the pile of documents, my heart pounding. 300 pages. Impossible for anyone who didn't already know the company's operations. But I wasn't just anyone. I had spent my entire childhood watching my father analyze markets, break down financial reports, and navigate the corporate battlefield. I didn't just know this company, I knew how to run it. I smiled politely. "Of course, sir." Let him think he had won.
For now.
That night, while the other trainees went home, I stayed behind, my hands cramping from typing. By 5:45 a.m., I placed the completed summary on Calloway's desk. By 8:30 a.m., he stormed into my office, his face a shade paler. "You wrote this?" he demanded. "Yes, sir." He flipped through the pages, his fingers tightening. There wasn't a single mistake. Instead of praising me, his lips curled in irritation. I wasn't supposed to succeed. I was supposed to fail. But I hadn't. Calloway slammed the file shut. "You got lucky." And just like that, I knew I had just made my first enemy. The following days were worse. My workload tripled. Tasks meant for 5 people were dumped on me alone. Executives ignored me, insulted me, humiliated me. One day, I spent the night preparing a detailed market analysis report. I handed it to Mr. Reynolds, another senior executive. He barely glanced at it before ripping it in half in front of the entire office. "This is garbage," he scoffed, tossing the shredded pages into the trash. Laughter rippled through the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. Because I was counting every insult, every humiliation, every single offense. They thought I was a nobody. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. A week later, I was serving coffee in a high-level board meeting. Yes, they had reduced me to an errand girl. That's when I overheard everything. "Westbridge is getting old. We push him out, and this company is ours." My stomach turned. They were plotting against my father. These snakes, these arrogant, power-hungry men, they had spent years growing fat off my father's generosity. And now, they wanted to destroy him?
No.
Not on my watch. That night, I stayed late, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I went through every financial report, every contract, every transaction. And what I found, made my blood run cold.
Fraud.
Embezzlement. Insider trading. These men weren't just corrupt, they were criminals. I drafted an anonymous email and sent it to my father. By morning, the entire company was in chaos. An internal audit had begun. Calloway, Reynolds, and their allies? They were panicking. And I was just getting started. The morning after the internal audit was announced, the entire office buzzed with paranoia. The usual air of cocky entitlement among the executives had turned into uneasy silence. The same men who smirked and strutted around the office now walked with tension in their shoulders, whispering in corners, casting nervous glances at every phone call and email. Reynolds was the first to snap. He stormed into the finance department, his voice dripping with rage. "Who the hell leaked the reports?" he snarled, slamming a thick binder onto the desk of one of the accountants. The poor man flinched but said nothing. Because we all knew. The walls were closing in. I sat at my desk, calm, silent, invisible, because they had no idea who had pulled the trigger. And that made it even better. It wasn't enough to make them nervous. I needed them to destroy each other. I spent the next few days whispering carefully crafted rumors, planting just enough seeds of doubt to turn their fragile alliances into powder kegs. One day, I passed by Calloway's office and whispered to an executive, "I heard Reynolds is blaming him for the audit." Later, I'd accidentally let it slip to Reynolds that Calloway had been talking to the board in private meetings. By the end of the day, Calloway and Reynolds, once the closest of allies, were having a shouting match in the conference room. Their voices were loud, angry, desperate.
Perfect.
My father, Jonathan Westbridge, had spent his life building this company from nothing. And now, thanks to the audit, he was angrier than I had ever seen him. "I want names," he told the legal team. His voice was cold, unshakable. "I want every detail. I want them to explain, to my face, why they thought they could steal from my company." I had never felt more proud of him. Because the moment they sat in that chair across from him, they were finished. I wasn't just going to let them get fired and walk away. I needed to make sure they turned on each other so viciously that they would never recover. That night, I fabricated an email chain, a fake set of conversations between Calloway and Reynolds, making it seem like they were secretly blaming each other for everything. The next morning, I accidentally left a printed copy on an open desk. By lunchtime, the entire executive boardroom was in chaos. "You snake!" Calloway roared, pointing a shaking finger at Reynolds. "I trusted you." Reynolds shot back. "You're the one who got sloppy." They were so busy tearing each other apart that they didn't even notice me, walking past them with a quiet smile. By the time the emergency board meeting was called, Calloway and Reynolds looked like men walking to the gallows. The room was filled with dead silence as they sat across from my father. "I trusted both of you," he said simply, his voice like a blade. "Tell me, why shouldn't I throw you both to the wolves?" Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, only for Calloway to cut him off, throwing him under the bus completely. "He was in charge of finance," Calloway spat. "If there's fraud, it's on him." Reynolds' face turned red with fury. "You lying bastard." And just like that, they destroyed themselves. My father leaned back, shaking his head. "I've heard enough," he said. "You're both fired." Calloway's face crumbled. Reynolds sank into his chair. And I just watched. Because their fate was sealed. The moment had finally come. When I walked into that boardroom, no longer hiding, no longer Emma Carter, but my real self, the silence was deafening. "You..." Calloway choked, his voice barely above a whisper. I set a thick folder of evidence onto the table. Surprise! They flipped through the pages. Proof of every lie, every theft, every secret deal. Reynolds' hands shook as he realized. He hadn't just lost his job. He had lost everything. Calloway and Reynolds were escorted out of the building like criminals. The employees, the same ones who had been treated like dirt for years, stood at their desks, watching in silent, bitter satisfaction. For the first time, the fear was gone. The tyrants had fallen. And I had won. As I passed Calloway, he turned to me, his face twisted with rage. You think you've won? He hissed. I leaned in, my voice calm. I didn't think it, I whispered. I know it. And with that, I walked away, leaving him in the ruins of his own downfall. The moment Calloway and Reynolds were escorted out, a strange silence fell over the entire company. The men who had once ruled with fear, who barked orders, belittled employees, and treated the company like their personal playground, were gone. People exchanged looks, whispering in stunned disbelief. For years, they had believed these men were untouchable, that no matter how corrupt they were, no matter how cruel, they would always hold power. And yet, I had destroyed them. I walked through the office, feeling the weight of every gaze on me. Some people looked at me with awe, others with uncertainty. But I didn't stop, because this wasn't over yet. There were still more names on my list. Calloway and Reynolds were just the beginning. The company was infested with snakes. Other senior executives had known about the fraud, had participated, had benefited from the corruption. And if they thought they were safe now, they were dead wrong. I spent the next few days digging deeper, uncovering who had been complicit in the illegal dealings. There were 3 more. Douglas Kent, Chief Operations Officer. Lauren Fields, Head of Investments. Marcus Vance, Director of Strategic Growth. Each one had played a role in the deception. Each one was about to fall. Douglas Kent had been sloppy in his cover-ups. He thought that because Calloway and Reynolds were gone, he could shift the blame entirely to them and escape untouched. He was wrong. I arranged for a private meeting with him, posing as a junior associate who wanted to learn from him. Kent sat back in his leather chair, smug as ever. They got what they deserved, he said, shaking his head. Calloway and Reynolds were idiots. They didn't know how to cover their tracks properly. He sipped his coffee, completely unaware that my phone was recording every word. By the time the conversation ended, I had everything I needed to take him down. I didn't go directly to my father with the evidence. Instead, I sent another anonymous email, this time to the entire board. By morning, Douglas Kent was summoned. He walked into the boardroom confident. By the time he walked out, his career was over. The company announced his immediate termination. 1 more down.
2 to go.
Lauren Fields was smarter than Kent. She had covered her tracks well, never leaving a direct trail leading back to her involvement. But she had one fatal flaw: greed. I dug into her financial records and found a series of offshore accounts under a shell company name. The problem? The shell company was registered under her cousin's name.
Sloppy.
It took me 2 days to compile the report, another 20 minutes to leak it to the legal team, and only 1 hour for my father to order her termination. Lauren never saw it coming. She had walked into the office as a powerful executive. She walked out as a disgraced fraud. By now, everyone in the company knew what was happening. People whispered my name in hushed tones. Some feared me. Some admired me. Marcus Vance, however, wasn't going to go down without a fight. He started covering his tracks, shredding documents, deleting files. But it was too late. I already had enough evidence to bury him. I didn't just leak his fraud, I exposed his illegal stock manipulations to the SEC. By the time security came for him, he was already packing his office. When he passed by me, he stopped. You think you've won? He hissed. I smiled.
No.
I know I have. And then he was gone. With all 5 corrupt executives gone, the company felt different. For the first time, employees walked through the halls without fear. I heard laughter, conversations, relief. People no longer whispered. They stood tall. Because the tyrants who had ruled over them
were gone.
And the company was finally free. With so many senior executives fired, the board had a serious problem.
Who was going to step up?
Who was capable enough to lead the company forward? I already knew the answer. But I waited for them to come to me. One evening, my father called me into his office. He looked at me for a long time. Then he sighed. You did all of this, didn't you? I didn't deny it. He leaned back, shaking his head with a smile. I always knew you were capable, he admitted. I just needed you to see it for yourself. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling the weight of everything I had done. I hadn't just exposed fraud. I had destroyed people's careers. I had torn down an empire built on lies. And now I had to decide what kind of leader I wanted to be. My father slid a document across the table. It was a formal executive offer. I would take over operations, stepping into a leadership role, not as his daughter, but as someone who had earned it. I stared at the offer for a long time. I had spent months bringing down the corrupt, but now I had a bigger responsibility. Could I handle it? Did I want this? And then I remembered the people, the employees who had suffered for years under bad leadership. I thought about the fear in their eyes before, and the relief now. I picked up the pen.
And I signed.
The morning I stepped into my new office, everything felt surreal. Just a few months ago, I was being treated like a nobody, forced to fetch coffee, humiliated,
Mocked. Now?
I was sitting where Calloway used to sit. His nameplate was gone.
His office, mine.
The entire building had shifted. Instead of fake smiles and power-hungry schemes, people walked with renewed energy, real conversations buzzing in the hallways. I had taken down every corrupt executive, but now I had a bigger mission: to rebuild this company into something better. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving I deserved to be here. Not as my father's daughter, but as a leader. I spent the next few weeks making real changes. Employees who had been mistreated, they got raises and fair treatment. Departments that had been neglected, they received proper funding. Toxic company culture? Eliminated. At first, some of the older board members resisted. They weren't used to seeing a young woman in power. I heard the whispers. She doesn't belong here. She's just riding on her father's name. She's too soft. She'll fail.
But I didn't argue.
I let my actions speak for me. And when the company's profits started rising, when employee satisfaction skyrocketed, when clients trusted us again, the whispers stopped. Because results don't lie. And I was proving them all wrong. I should have known Calloway wouldn't go down quietly. One evening, as I walked to my car, a black sedan pulled up. The window rolled down.
Calloway.
He looked different. Disheveled. Hollow-eyed.
Desperate.
You think you've won? He sneered. I didn't flinch. I don't think, Calloway. I know. His jaw clenched. I built this company, he spat. You're nothing without me. I laughed softly. That's where you're wrong. I didn't need you. This company didn't need you. You needed this company to stay corrupt. That's the only way you ever stayed in power. His face twisted with hate. Enjoy your little victory, he hissed. Because one day, you'll be just like me. My smile didn't falter. No, I said simply. I'll be better. He drove off. And just like that, the last remnant of corruption was gone. Even after everything, the board had the final say. Would they keep me or push me aside once the company was stable again? At the final meeting, my father stood before them. He looked at the men and women who had served alongside him for decades. Then he turned to me. Some of you doubt my daughter, he said, his voice strong. Some members looked uncomfortable. But let me remind you, she is the reason this company survived. She is the reason it is thriving. He looked at me, pride in his eyes. I don't need to vote, he said. I already know the answer. Then he turned to the rest of the board. What about you? A long pause. Then one by one they nodded. She's earned it, one said. She saved us, another admitted. She's the future, a third murmured. The vote was unanimous. I was staying. I had won. But not just because I was Jonathan Westbridge's daughter. I had won because I had proven myself. Months passed. The company grew stronger. The corruption?
Gone.
The employees? Thriving. And me? I had become the leader I was meant to be. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But because I had fought for something bigger than myself. As I sat in my office, I glanced at the nameplate on my desk. Not Calloway. Not Reynolds. Not CEO's daughter. Just my name. Because I had earned it. And I would protect what I built for as long as I lived.